So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Gian Dodici, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He's going to introduce himself, and so see.
Thank you, Fred. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you're not going to get into your afternoon coma quite yet. So I'm Gian Dodici. I work for the Fish and Wildlife Service in our Cortland office. In our Partners for Fish and Wildlife program, we do habitat restoration around the state. We do stream work, wetland work, upland grass work. Most of what I focus on is stream work. We do big projects, in-stream restoration, habitat enhancement projects. And we also do a lot of culvert replacements, fish passage type projects. Co-authors, if you look in the abstracts, you just see the program just says et al., but co-authors on this are Dave Lemon and Scott Prendle, both DEC fisheries, one's a fisheries biologist, the other one's a fisheries manager at Region 7 Court. And without them, and all the other partners I'll mention at the end and throughout, obviously we wouldn't be able to get any of this stuff. So the drainage we're talking about is the upper Susquehanna, so this Chesapeake Bay. There's obviously a lot of interest in work in the Chesapeake Bay, mostly driven from the Chesapeake Bay itself, but it works out into the upper Susquehanna. There's an interest in our office. We have a coalition, the Upper Susquehanna Conservation Alliance, that does a lot of work, a lot of work bringing a lot of different groups together to try to identify problems, identify areas to work in. So our brook trout working group identified several watersheds in upper Susquehanna drainage, and this Wiley Brook just kind of perked to the top, primarily because it's exclusively a brook trout watershed. It's one of the few watersheds in the upper Susquehanna, at least, that it's all brook trout. There are no non-native salmonids in it. And probably because down here you'll see this, it ties right into the Susquehanna River, and the Susquehanna River down here is pretty warm, so there's kind of a thermal barrier probably between this and other tributaries in the watershed that have brown trout as well as brook trout. So we focused on Wiley Brook, and then this red, the red polygon, then this red line is the town of Coventry. So most of Wiley Brook drainage is in the town of Coventry. So we approached the town highway folks about their interest in upsizing some culverts, and they were very interested in doing it. As we go through some of the projects, I can talk about some of the issues that they had with some of their crossings, but they were interested in partnering with us on doing work here. So, so Wiley Brook again is exclusively brook trout. It's not great habitat throughout. So there's brook trout in most of the tributaries. Some of those tributaries do dry up in the summer. So one of the big objectives to get this connectivity was, when these streams dry up and all the fish, if they can't make it out, obviously they don't make it out, they're not going to survive. But then being able to recolonize that good habitat. But a lot of the streams are bedrock controlled. There's not a lot of good spawning habitat in there, but there is good spawning habitat in some places. So the thinking was the better connectivity we could have within the whole drainage, obviously the better the population would be in the long run. So the first thing we did was kind of a quick GIS exercise, just looking at. So this is kind of a blow up of Wiley Creek or Wiley Brook in the town of Coventry. There's 43 miles of roads, 34 miles of stream, and 23 crossings. So our roads and streams cross, there are 23 of those. We went out and looked at all of them. All the ones in gray weren't barriers. So that bottom left picture there is just an example of a crossing that's not a barrier. The one up above that, it's kind of a partial barrier. At higher flows, it might be a bit of a velocity barrier, but a fish could probably jump up that and swim up through that. And then these two here on the right are obviously barriers. The one on the right, maybe a fish could jump in. That's actually a higher. There's probably 2 or 3 feet up from the pool up there, and then there's that rock kind of plunge pool there where the county put in. So even if a fish could get up in there, that's an 80-foot concrete lined culvert. So the fish, if it could get in there, it wouldn't be able to swim all the way out. Unlikely that it would be able to swim all the way out. So we implemented a couple of different techniques. This is one. This is a town road, Wiley Horton Road. We surveyed downstream. You know, that's obviously a little brook trout. So lots of brook trout downstream. There were brook trout upstream of this. Dave Lemon, when he had surveyed upstream earlier, had detected brook trout upstream. When we went back out there and did the survey downstream, there weren't any brook trout upstream. So this one we put in a squashed arch. So we replaced that 4-foot perch culvert with a 12-foot squashed arch in 2017 there. Yeah, then that was right after construction, so a little bit muddy, didn't look great. But you know, 1 year later, this looked good. We didn't actually fill the squashed arch culvert, but that grade control downstream allowed that sediment to start degrading upstream. So, you know, one bankful event after implementation, and that culvert's starting to fill in with gravel, and you know, we expect it to continue to do that. So now this is one project done. This is Seymour Road. This is another. This is a county road, and you know, this perch culvert again. It's a 5-foot culvert, probably about a 2-foot drop there. This was an interesting site. There were brook trout in this plunge pool below it, but upstream there wasn't a single fish when we surveyed it. We shocked probably a quarter mile upstream of the culvert and didn't turn up a single fish of any species. So, you know, at some point in the past it probably dried up, and then obviously a fish couldn't get back up through there. So rather than doing the squashed arch, so preliminary work, I guess, you know, we go out there and we do all the survey work. I don't know if, I wasn't at the workshop yesterday, but presume they talked about some of the survey work that goes into stream simulation, I think is the model they were talking about maybe, and some of the survey work that goes in. So Scott Prindle, my other co-author, he helped with the survey, and we did, you know, obviously the fishery survey, but also the geomorphic survey, you know, measuring the profile, trying to get the slope so you tie everything in appropriately. So we started this project a year before the other one, 2016. You know, the first job in a project like this is obviously pulling out the old pipe, making a big hole for the new pipe. So we went from that 4 or 5 foot round culvert to we ended up with a 15-foot arch. This picture is kind of neat because you can see on the left there is probably an old bridge abutment. So probably the old stone bridge that was there back in the, you know, whenever, before that round culvert went in. So it's probably a bridge that was probably even appropriately sized back in the day. And you know, then when that started to fail, they probably went in and put the smaller round culvert because it was easier just to dump that in there. And so that culvert was small enough that the inlet to it would plug up, and every big rain event, water would come up over the road. So it was a problem for the town. The town was eager to do it. So we ended up purchasing the culvert, and the town, that's the town highway super there, Rick Ranger, he ended up with his crew assembling the thing, which I don't know if any of you have ever seen these big contact structures, the big erector sets, you know, big pieces coming and bolting in place, either on site or close to site, and then truck them in. So we tried these. These ones came with these footers, and then we set those footers on top of Jersey barriers. We use as footers below those footers. So this is a bottomless arch culvert. It's 15 feet by 7.5 wide. So this is, again, right after construction. This one we didn't really put in any grade control downstream. And we tried to go with, well, we'll let the stream do what it's going to do. We put a little bit of grade control upstream. I didn't want to lose the grade upstream. So upstream we used some log structures. So this was kind of the original grade. We used this couple of logs. There's 3 logs in here. You can kind of see that Z shape there, maybe. These rock and roll logs, we call them. But this top log kind of set grade, so we didn't lose any grade upstream. And then we put some rock and, you know, some little rock to try to do some grade control. But one big 4-inch rain event in 2017, and you can see it kind of started to expose the footers a little bit. And we had some scour. We had a head cut work up. So the contractor who put in that other project, the first one I showed, actually came out and we put in a more robust grade control structure in there. Again, so with the same idea of then backing that water up, and you can see how you have deposition up there above the structure, and so those footers are buried again. We did another big rain event last year that blew out the hamlet just over the town of Oxford, just over the hill, lost 4 culverts in that one storm. It was a 4 or 5 inch rain event. And so you see there's some scour below the structure. That drop is a little higher than it was. So, if we hadn't put that grade control in, it's likely it would have gone up through there and maybe undermined the footers on that culvert. So one of the things we have to do is come back in and do some work downstream to try to tie into that and reduce that jump a little bit and go on. So we have bottomless arch culvert, we have squashed arch culvert. Some of the barriers, this is a state route 235, runs north-south from Coventry down to Bainbridge, if you know the central tier at all. So DOT wasn't interested in replacing this bridge or doing anything with this bridge, but they were fine with us mitigating this barrier. So same thing, we just put these grade control structures in, and we have to put a series of them in. We don't typically like to put in more than a foot drop between these structures. Probably a bigger track could do a little better than that. We can build some chutes in there, so functionally you might have a 2-foot drop, but we like to keep it around a foot or less. So we put a series of those structures in. One bankful event later, and that pool was filled in. So the farmer who owned this field, he was excited. This is on private land. He was excited to do it because he used to run his cows through this. So he was excited to get this back so his cows could get back through there. We weren't so keen on that, but so I think he's probably not going to do it. But that was something that was one of his objectives, and one of the reasons he let us do it was because he was going to get access to his cattle crossing again. And then, a year later, it looks good. The pools have all sorted out. So below all these steps is a nice pool. And just obviously for reference is what it looked like before. The last one is that same one I showed you in that earlier slide. Just county road is that 80-foot culvert, concrete line. The county went in, redid that culvert probably 5 or 6 years ago. So they weren't interested in right-sizing the culvert. I mean, it's probably 20 or 30 feet up to the road, so it would have been an expensive project to go in there and do it. So same type of thing. We just put these big rock structures in there, backed water up. So one of the things with these plunge pools is you end up with a really deep, nice habitat there. So a lot of the fisheries folks don't like losing that habitat because it's typically the best pool in the stream, right? That's where the biggest fish are, probably the most number of fish, the rocks that they put in there. So you lose the depth, maybe the potential for some of the size because you don't have that. And the only reason those pools are as deep as they are and they are as big as they are is because of that hose pipe that's just upstream of it. So it's not really a natural pool for a stream like that. So we try to we counsel them, I guess, that you're going to get the pool habitat back. It's just going to be further downstream. As you step that stream down from these structures, you get all these these little pools. So instead of having a 4-foot pool, you get a 1-foot pool and maybe a 1.5-foot pool, a 2-foot pool throughout. So you get that pool habitat in there. It's just not the depth as those big plunge pools are. But so that's basically what we do. Again, we couldn't have done this without all of our partners. Fish and Wildlife Service is mentioned there. Just generically, but our Lower Great Lakes Fisheries Office, Betsy Trometer, a lot of money through Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture. Well, did we get Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture money for this? I don't think we did.
National Fish Pass.
It's all National Fish Passage money. And then the Upper Susquehanna Coalition, they came in and did all the plantings after the fact, got our buffers going again. And some of the TU chapters were helpful. And Dave, Scott, obviously we couldn't have done it without them, all of their survey work, and then they went out and did all lead work and identifying these barriers and prioritizing stuff. So this year we're doing one more culvert, and then there's one major culvert in that system that that we still have to find funding for. And then all the barriers in that one little sub-watershed will be addressed. So then we can go work in the main stem, get some PFR on it, and be good to go. So that's all I have.